Ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to welcome back Marcus to Shake It Up the podcast. He has just undergone procedure number 2, and to refresh everybody's memory, he is going through 3 procedures and then the 4th to activate. Correct, Marcus?
That's correct, yeah. The next one is to put the modular unit in.
Okay. And that's going, they're going to put it right here?
Yes, the right side.
Okay. So anyway, do we have any updates? What's going on? How'd the procedure go?
So yeah, I mean, I'll talk through we left off with some questions on the last podcast,
Yep.
and I'll talk through what I found out. Talking through it. So the second procedure, those watching, much like the first procedure, pretty groggy on Friday, working through the pain medication. At some point I switched over to Tylenol on Friday. So the pain, not too bad. One thing I talked about on the last podcast, and I did confirm, since then, was they do use a strong numbing agent on your head. And I talked to the surgeon, and it does take a bit of time to wear off. Now, when I had the last surgery, it was just starting to feel, things were starting to come back to normal. Like I had pretty good feeling in my head. As I talked to you here 4 days after, similar to the last time, I'm starting to regain some feeling in my head, but it's still I'd say the upper half is still really strong, numbing, but then the bottom half is starting to come back. I think where that goes back to what I was saying about the pain medication is it doesn't have you as reliant on pain medicine as you typically would be, because the numbing agent really controls the pain for the sutures. For those watching, I can show you here. I don't know if you can see it, but I have about there it goes.
Oh yeah, there it is.
Yeah, that's about a 6-inch, about probably 4 to 5 inch incision they did. And I can feel it if I pat it down or whatnot. The other one was about 3 or 4 inches over here. They took the staples out, and that one seems to be healing pretty well. Sort of jumping around, but coming back to the topic of pain, the pain up here and over here, again, because this top part of your head is the numbing is still strong, you don't feel the pain from the sutures that you, I think, typically would. So coming back to it 4 days after, really the numbing is the biggest part, you're dealing with. And again, you're starting to feel a little bit more pain as the days go on. So a couple of things we left off on the last one, and Steve, you can keep me honest here. So I did a procedure called the pilot hole, and they did that again the second time. Steve talked about on the last one, he has caps where the hole was, where the burr hole was. I don't have those caps. My head is relatively flat in there, which is nice. The other side of that, though, is the placement seemed to go pretty well. It's more accurate with the burr hole that Steve had, but with the pilot hole, my surgeon seemed comfortable, and he had remarked or made the comment that other surgeons do it. So they seemed good with the procedure. They wake you up in the middle of it again. They woke me up in the middle of this one, and when they went through the testing and everything, they felt the placement was good. And so I would just say the pilot hole for me seemed to work. I'll find out in a couple of weeks when they start doing the programming. But it was, it's everything as far as I know seems to be good.
Good. The one thing that I really wanted to touch on here that I kind of left you with last time is your wife and or your support as you've been preparing for the surgery, leading up to the idea of having DBS surgery and stuff. How has your family, wife and family been? Because they're typically the support. My family was great. There's no, I was my own worst enemy at times, but my family was great about it.
Yeah, likewise. My wife has been my rock on this. I mean, she drove me to the surgery, obviously, came and picked me up the next day. People will do this differently, but with my kids are somewhat younger. I did not have them come visit me in either hospital stay. I just tried to treat everything as normal. So, I said goodbye to them in the morning. They did their thing, and then the next day I came home, and you'll we can talk about later, but just not able to do as much. So I depend on my wife and kids to do a lot of stuff. My son's out mowing the lawn right now, so that's nice. And my wife has been running, doing errands for me. So, though I feel okay, relatively okay, the challenges for me now during these recovery periods are twofold. One, you have the physical limitations. You can't really lift anything. And that becomes a challenge because you feel like you could. And because you don't feel the sutures, you
Right.
feel like, oh, okay, I could just go grab a gallon of milk or something. But you can't because you run all kinds of risks, tearing the sutures or whatnot. So it's kind of people watching this that will go through the procedure. That's something you have to keep in mind. It's very deceiving. You don't feel the pain. You feel like you feel pretty much okay,
Yeah.
but you can't do a lot of things, because of it. And so, that's challenging. The other thing here is, driving and such. You feel like you feel okay to drive, and I think I'm okay. But then, the challenge is, knowing what those limits are and what you can do and get away with, or safely get away with. So
Now, did you have the procedure on a Thursday again?
I did Thursday morning, and I was out Friday.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're actually what 3 days out? Friday,
Yeah,
Saturday, Sunday. Yeah, 3 days out.
yeah.
Did you feel any different after this surgery in terms of just I told you multiple times that I had this little malaise, almost a little depression, mini depression as I was waiting for this to be activated. Uh, Still everything copacetic, everything's good.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting point. I did not have that in the first surgery. The second surgery, I did have a bit of malaise on Friday. I don't know that I would term it depression, but it was definitely a malaise. I think that's a good word. And it's not even tied to activating the device. It's just, I think it's some combination of the pain pills they gave me and just being in the hospital overnight, kind of gave me this apathetic feeling. And so I'll be honest, I slept more on Friday than I did after the first surgery. Um, and so, yeah, that was tricky. It felt weird. But then Saturday, I felt really good. One thing I would recommend here to the viewers, and my surgeon brought this up. Um, it kind of goes back to the numbing in the head. One of the things I took on Friday that really helped was a muscle relaxer. It was not prescribed to me. I had it from a previous condition,
Hmm.
but my surgeon talked about how sometimes muscle relaxers help because you're cutting into the muscle and the brain, and it can have an effect where I don't know what it is, something with the nerves and such, but he described it as the muscles kind of contract as a reaction to the surgery. And he had talked about muscle relaxers sometimes
Hmm.
help that. And I can just say, for me, between sleeping and recovery, when I took that muscle relaxer on Friday night, I had a great night's sleep, and I really felt good the next day.
Good,
So,
good.
so it's just one thing to consider. I don't know if doctors, every doctor is different, whether they'd be comfortable doing that or whether that's even something they recommend. but I can just say for me, it really felt good
Mm-hmm.
that night, taking the muscle relaxer and sleeping that night. So yeah.
Great. I'm not going to. We've answered most of the questions. Is there anything else that you'd like to share? Last time you said you're kind of taking almost a comme si comme ça attitude toward the surgery and stuff. Now, do you kind of want to get it over with? Are you excited about, seeing that this puppy actually works?
Yeah, there is that. I'm going through this for a reason. So, having it work, I did feel the benefit during the surgery. They wake you up and they turn on a device and you see the tremor reduction. Um, I guess what was different about this also was my left hand is the tremor is stronger than my right hand. And so this surgery was to address the left. And so I was able to see more of a benefit than the first time. The first time it was pretty straightforward. They did the surgery, they tested it when they woke me up.
Mm-hmm.
But this time they used the hand that had the stronger tremor, so I could see the benefit more.
Mm-hmm.
So that was good going into this one. Um, Excitement, I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm excited to get through the next surgery. After the 2 overnight stays, it'll be nice to do an outpatient surgery where I can
Yeah,
just go straight home.
I can believe
I'm
that.
looking forward to that. Um, I'm just looking forward to getting back on with things in general. So so yeah, coming back to it, it's just I don't know. It'll be nice to get through it. That said, any thoughts from the last podcast that I didn't tie on here? One thing I didn't talk about. So the pilot hole, you do end up with a titanium plate, is what they use instead of the screw.
Okay.
Um, so they put that in there, and it covers up the. They use that to anchor the wire, and then they cover the hole with that titanium plate. So
Right. They've got
so
to
I
do
have
something.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and going back to the burr hole versus the plate, you would feel a more pronounced bump from the screw for the burr hole. Me, I suppose I don't know if when I'm all healed I'll see, but I would have a plate in place of your screw, and
Right.
so I don't know what that'll feel like, but as of now, I don't really have any feeling there. So that was one thing we talked about. Um, the pronouncement on my head of the wires. The surgeon talked a little bit about that, and how it'll recede
Mm-hmm.
with time. And we talked about that on the last podcast, but that was something I was a little bit caught off
Well,
guard
what
on.
did your surgeon say? What as far as it goes? Because mine, I mean, it's just this tiny little back here. I don't even think about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, it's weird as you say that. Like after the second surgery, and again, I'm only 4 days out, but I feel less of what I felt before, and I don't know why.
Okay.
Like I don't know if there's something where they moved the wire or whatnot, but after the first surgery, people watching this, you might feel a stronger bump. As I feel around here, I can feel it, but it does feel a little bit lower than the first surgery. Now, the next surgery, obviously, they're going to drop it down into my chest and then hook up the device. So, so yeah, after I do that, I'll have a similar podcast and talk through what that's like. Um,
Good.
the other thing being, the length of the incision we talked about on the last call. Steve, I don't think you had a long incision.
Mm-mm.
I do, and I think it's tied to the plate they put in. He talked about that. That's typical. They do a long incision. So whether I had the burr hole or the pilot hole,
Mm-hmm.
um, my surgeon does a long incision in the head. I'd be curious other people what their experiences are, but he didn't seem to think it was irregular. And I guess for me, just preference, I'd rather have the longer incision and the smaller the plate than having. Sorry, Steve, if you don't want to hear this, but then having the screw, the screw would.
No, I.
I'll just be
Hey,
honest.
look, I totally agree with you. And honestly, had I been given the choice, I might have gone your route with the tiny incision, but Dr. Hoyt was very confident that what he was doing was the best way to do it. Who am I to argue? It's all news to me. And as I've said before, I learned more about DBS surgery since I've had the surgery than leading up to it. In spite of all the questions I asked, there's so many, and that's one of the reasons that I think this is helpful for people is that if you're contemplating having DBS surgery, or you're even just deciding which way to go, because as I've said, my brother, who is 75, I think he's going to be 76 this year, he said absolutely not. He had no desire to have DBS surgery. Now, even though his hands are fairly bad, but he's in a different place. He is retired, as is my sister-in-law. So the two of them are, they have very little stress in their lives. And when he does have it, he just is able to compensate for it.
Yeah, that's interesting. You bring up two interesting points there. One, around learning more after the surgery. That's also for me the case. I don't know. I did a lot of research before the surgery,
Mm-hmm.
and I thought I knew the surgery pretty well. But then when I did it, I found myself looking at different topics that I wasn't usually looking at, and I don't. Maybe that's just the nature of it. I don't know, but I consider myself pretty well read on it for a couple of years before I had the surgery. I didn't just jump in. I waited, and but there were some things that I found later, that talking to the surgeon and talking to people in some of the nurses, that they gave me new things I didn't look at. So that was interesting. Now, to your brother, that brings up another interesting point around age and having the procedure. Um, I would, just having gone through it, I guess I can empathize or sympathize with your brother a bit, in that if I were 75, I don't know that I would go. It's a pretty, though there's not a lot of pain, there's a lot of physical, there's a lot you go through to have it.
Correct.
And I'll talk a moment. One of the other questions was why I had two surgeries and you had one, and I'll talk through that in a moment. But going through the two surgeries and then the third in a few weeks, it's a lot of stress on the body. And at 75, I don't know what I'm going to be like, and hopefully I make it to 75. But I don't know that I would go through that. Now, what I would say, the counterpoint, and again, going into the research I did, I think this isn't me telling people what to do, so viewers don't take it that way. I'm just giving my personal opinion. I would probably have done the ultrasound if I were in my late 70s, mid 70s, just looking at the impact on the body, the no surgery, the stress on the body is relatively small. Now, the benefits are not as good as DBS. I'll say that. DBS, at least what I'm expecting and what I've heard and what I've seen during the wake-ups,
Yeah.
is it does greatly reduce, just short of eliminate, the tremor. And so yeah, I think if I were your brother, I would probably look at something more around ultrasound,
Right.
and having that done, with the understanding you're not going to get the greater reduction. But if he's having trouble eating or drinking or those things, I did talk to some people similar to you who had done the ultrasound, and they gave me the pros and cons, and I'll save that for another podcast. But yeah, if I were older, the short answer is I would probably do the ultrasound. Now, going back to what I said a moment ago, the other thing we talked about in the last podcast, Steve and I, was Steve only did one surgery where they implanted both leads,
Right.
and my surgery was split in two. I did one where they did one side and one where they did the other side. My surgeon had an interesting reasoning on that.
Yeah.
And I'll talk through that here for a moment. Again, don't factor in what I'm saying in your decision. Whoever's watching this, don't take this as an absolute. If you want to talk to me, I'm more than happy to talk to you. But I would use this information to talk to your surgeon. My surgeon explained it to me as when you do the first one, you inevitably lose a little bit of brain fluid, and the brain, sort of floats in your head, if you will.
Hmm.
And so what happens if you do both on, on the one surgery, the brain will sort of shift a moment, like not anything noticeable. I mean, obviously, Steve, it was successful for you, and it was good. But my surgeon just talked about the placement. Um, if you do the second one over 2 weeks, he sees the brain fluid regenerate, and so the brain comes back to that sort of that position of the first surgery.
Uh-huh.
And so when he does the second incision, he's working off of the location of the brain within that fluid, and so he's able to place it a little bit more. I'm hesitant to say accurately. I mean, that's the word, but I don't mean to cast doubt on people that have, because there are plenty of people that only did one surgery. I talked to another gentleman, and he only had one surgery, and he was fine, and he said the results were good and everything.
Good.
But this is one of those things where you work off the surgeon, and he said he only started doing two surgeries a couple of years ago. And his reasoning was when he read what other surgeons have done, and the shifting of the brain sounds more, bigger than it probably is, but it's just there is some, movement of the brain as that fluid comes out. Um, so anyways, it's a rather short description, but if you need me to elaborate, it just comes down to the surgeon I had felt he could more accurately place the second wire if he did it 2 weeks later.
Well, what it comes down to is each surgeon's philosophy, how they were taught, how many of these surgeries they've done, as far as what and what their experience has been. The one question that comes up though, in my mind, is if that was his rationale, why didn't they put in the second one and the device down here? This isn't going to lose any fluid out of your cerebrum or around your brain. It cut 3 surgeries to 2. And there's probably surgeons out there that do it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've thought that same thing about just do the device while you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I I guess in hindsight, this is no slight to the surgeon or slight. This is just opinion. You could even say uneducated opinion. I would probably still have just done one surgery. Just the impact. It's the recovery is not terrible, but I started to say earlier, you do feel a stress on the body when
Right.
somebody cuts in your brain and or implants something in your brain. So I guess if I could have done it in one, I understand the risk with the equilibrium, but as I talk to him more, I don't know how much you talk to your doctor, but a lot of it's done by a robot, which I was kind of surprised. It's they have a robot that does a lot of the placement with the you know, and this is as I understand it, and I'll confirm this, but that you're in an MRI as they're doing the surgery, and they're
Mm-hmm.
they're watching, the location. They can track, where the placement's going in the MRI image, but there's a robot that's actually doing the placement, and so
That's funny. I'll have
um,
to ask. I'll have to ask my surgeon because there was no mention made of any kind of robotic surgeries or anything, and that I find that very interesting.
yeah, Ohio State is where I had it done, and they used the term the robot a few times in describing it, but there's a robot that places it, and I would assume it's being fed the data from the MRI to do the placement. So yeah, that was interesting talking through, but um, I'll find out here in a few weeks when they start doing the programming how, and then they do a follow up MRI at the end of the month. But But I go back to the stress of the second surgery, and when I get through the third, I'm sure it'll be the same way. I'm 4 weeks out, or I'm probably roughly almost 3 weeks out from the first one,
Hmm.
and it's just the people watching this. You have to be prepared. It's about 6 weeks that you can't really do any physical activity, and that's tough. I mean, at least for me, that's tough. I can still do a lot of walks and such, but as I said earlier, you don't feel the pain up here, and you feel like you can do all these things, but mentally, if
Right.
you go to do this stuff, you're going to tear your sutures out, or you're going to cause a stress on the body.
Yeah, we went on a vacation down to Hocking Hills. As a matter of fact, you're probably
That's
familiar.
down my neck.
Huh?
That's down in my neck. That's not too far from me.
Oh yeah. Oh, we love it down there. Anyway, the one thing I couldn't do that I really wanted to do was swim. I could go in the
Yeah,
pool. Well, no, I couldn't even. He didn't even want this underwater. So
yeah,
basically, waist high was where I was at. So I had to keep this dry and this dry, obviously.
yeah.
But that was like 2 weeks after my surgery, so totally understandable.
No, it's tough. Now, the other thing we talked about on the last podcast I wanted to bring up on that note, well, I'll talk about like the showering and stuff is tough.
Hmm.
Like what you're talking about with, I'm not an avid swimmer. I mean, I go swimming in the summer at times, but it's not something that's a big part of my life. But there were a couple of things, the shower restrictions are tough. Those watching, whether you have one or two or however many incisions you get at a time, you can't have direct shower on your head for a while, and you just want to scrub your hair. You just want to wash your hair. I mean, you can see my hair; it's pretty
Well, funny
disheveled and pretty.
funny story about that. I misunderstood my surgeon, and I remember sitting in his office saying, 2 weeks without washing my hair? And he said, what? No. He said, just wash it with a washcloth and soap. Just don't hit. He said, I don't want it under the driving force of a shower head. And I said, oh, why didn't you say that the first time? Because that was really upsetting me. You know, I'm like you. I have to wash my hair every day, or ugh, I just feel
Yeah,
icky.
mine's feeling pretty gross. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, yeah. I'll be happy when I can have those restrictions off, but yeah. I was starting to say there. It's the water more than the swimming. It's the shower restriction that's tough. That'll be. I'll go through that. I'll see where that ends up in a few weeks.
Okay.
Um, sh- yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just starting to say travel is something that's tough because I have two titanium plates in my head. I'm working with Medtronic right now to figure out how I can get through security at the airport. But yeah, yeah, I don't know. I mean, as I sit here, they haven't get. I have to talk to them. I haven't gotten an answer, so that's
Well,
I can
I can
update the
help you out
viewers.
there. You can't. What's going to happen is they're going to wand you pretty much every time. Mainly, I've got two titanium hips, and I've got a bunch of screws and stuff in my shoulders, plus a cage in my back. So I've had plenty of surgeries, and we were on one trip. This was before my DBS surgery, and we landed in Nairobi, Kenya. And going and coming, I happened to get the same guy with the wand who needed to run it over me. And he goes, "Oh, I remember you." And so we just had a good laugh about it. But they've got to do their job. And but
Yeah,
that
no, it's fine. I don't take it the other way. Um, it's something though. You know, I wish after the surgery they could talk more about. But I was starting to say though, while underwater, one of the other restrictions I'm waiting to hear back from is scuba diving. I scuba dive,
oh
or I've scuba dived, I've been, the surgeon seemed to think, I'd be okay to certain depths, but he didn't know if the pressure, what the impact would be. So I'm waiting to get an answer back on that, whether scuba diving is
That'll be
something I'll
interesting to hear.
be. Yeah, I don't know what depth I'll be able to go to. I mean, I don't do deep water dives, so I think 100 feet is
Right.
probably about the deepest I've around there is where I usually go.
Yeah.
So
Always wanted to try scuba diving. Never have. Whenever we go to the islands or something, of course I snorkel and
yeah,
stuff, but that's shallow water stuff.
yeah, snorkeling you can. I don't know what the depth is. Maybe 20, 15 feet. You get
15.
down
You go
20 feet.
much.
And
You
you can,
might go much down much further than that, and the water pressure really gets your ears.
yeah, yeah. Your ears start popping. It's pretty bad. But scuba you can go down relatively easy, down like 100 feet,
Yes.
and you can move right now. There's different certifications for different depths, but I've already accepted. I'll have some limitations with the surgery that I won't be able to go to certain depths. So that's something I'm waiting to hear back on. I started to say earlier one other thing I didn't talk about on the last podcast, and I'll be careful with the topic. Obviously you're an ambassador with Medtronic. I have not registered, and I will register. I don't have a issue with that. But one thing goes back to what we talked about earlier with the research before the surgery. What I kind of wished I had done, I did some research on the different devices. I don't know what
Hmm.
devices were proposed to you, but there were roughly three different devices that were proposed to me, and I went with Medtronic in large part. That's what was recommended to me. But I think if I had to do it again, I would look at the pros and cons of the other devices more. I say that. Excuse me. The Medtronic device is really good. It does a lot of collection of data, which I really liked, and it's it's very responsive, and they've been doing it the longest, so that's the
Hmm.
obvious. The one I can tell you that I ruled out right away, and I would not have gone with, and I would still not go with, is Abbott had a device, but the big selling point with Abbott was they can do the programming remotely. You can sit at home, and they can do it from wherever they are, in the hospital or whatever. So they can program your modular unit remotely. I was not comfortable with that. That somebody could access my device
Yeah. Well,
remotely.
UTMC, they just told me, said, we use Medtronic. And the one thing that I do know about Medtronic, now, this literally could change tomorrow, but Medtronic is the only one, as far as I know, and I have this from Medtronic, that has what they call an MRI mode.
Mhm.
And that's where in the my little Samsung A15, which is my controller, I can there's a code they punch in and everything else, and it so whoever's doing the MRI knows exactly what they can and cannot do.
Yeah, I've heard that, and I've heard people talk about that MRI mode. Um, that's interesting. That was more of a benefit I found out about later, and I was talking to one of the nurses about that they can just shut it off when they're doing an MRI. So yeah, that is another benefit. I don't mean to tell the viewers one way or another what to go with. I just mine is more to say, and in your case, the surgeon may just already determine what you're getting beforehand. I don't know,
Yeah,
but that's something that I would encourage people to look into. Is it the right device, and why? What are the pros and cons? My surgeon talked about Boston Scientific has a device that uh, a lead that they're going to change where they're experimenting with. I think ours has 8 leads on it, and Boston Scientific's has more leads to collect more data. Now that's experimental. As I'm talking to you, it's nothing being pushed, or I'm sure there are test studies being done with it, but those are things that may change in the future that we will we'll have to wait and see what that does.
yeah. My big fear is that next year they're going to find a cure for ET, and I'm still here stuck with the bumps. But that's
Well, yeah, I mean, no, that's a good point. And I looked, that was part of the research I did. No, that's a good point, Steve. That was a big question of mine with my surgeon several times was, can you remove this if there is a
yes,
cure, or quotes cure? And they all said, yes, it can be removed. Now, what does that cure mean? Everybody watching this will have different degrees of research they'll do. I've done a lot of research, and why I waited about 7, 8 years to get this done was I was kind of hoping stem cell research would gene editing would come about, or something would come into play, or at least give me some window that it's coming sooner than later. As I sit here, that is not
yeah.
a realistic option. I think in the studies I've read, especially recently, I think in the next 10 to 20 years, I think that's a very realistic possibility.
Well, I think more
That
attention's being paid to it. So,
it is.
and that's the purpose of this podcast. I ain't going to get rich doing this, but the point is that it's cheap and easy to say I want to raise awareness, but the fact is, ET is like one of those orphan diseases, but it's not. You've got 4 to 10 million people who are afflicted with it. Not to mention the family members and everybody else who are, not only might they get it as they get older, but they've got to deal with you or me, and that makes it's kind of a problem. So my sincere hope is that people start paying attention to what is going on out there, and everybody talks about Parkinson's disease. Well, you know this is 10 times more prevalent than Parkinson's. It's just not as I think it's got a bad it got a bad name, essential tremor. Now, if they said death by inches, then somebody might have paid attention sooner. But that's really what it felt like, at least for me. Was you're just it was just one thing and another. Every day something was taken away from me. So
Yeah, no, that's fair. I
yeah,
mean, I have some of the same restrictions and such, and I think we talked about on the last podcast, just like you slowly start to stop doing things that you used to do, um, more to avoid having to talk about the tremor or have to deal with the tremor. And so I'm still kind of, that's something I'm still kind of looking forward to, is going back to doing some things I did before the tremor got worse. And but I think going back to the gene editing, I think, and the other gentleman I talked to, similar to you, he's in the Columbus area. He's in the veterinary science, and we talked about, once they identify the gene, or the exact gene that causes it, I think that's when you'll start to see a lot of progress towards I don't want to say a cure, but maybe it's a cure. They'll edit the gene out, or they'll edit the gene that's causing the tremor. But
hmm
I think the last I read, Stanford had found it's something tied to, of all things, obesity. So I don't know what that means or what it'll become, but there have been a lot of breakthroughs recently, and I think I'm cautiously optimistic 10 to 20 years is the window that you might see some initial studies where they're doing gene editing. But in the meantime, like you said, we have these devices, and people watching this will have to make those decisions.
absolutely.
And hopefully, if they choose to go the route, it's successful for people watching this. One thing before we end it, I just want to talk about that I talked in the last one, was really a lot of the pain I feel now, and it's the greater pain because it doesn't get covered by the numbing. Is they put the device on your head to hold it in place to do the incisions,
Yes.
and you have these pressure points. You can see two here. If you can see, I used to have some band-aids, but they put pins and they attach it. There's a few in the
Yeah,
back of my
folks,
head.
it's literally a cage. They
It is a cage.
You've probably seen it in a movie or two where they've got
Yeah.
somebody's but they have to have your head so precisely placed because uh, we're talking fractions of a millimeter here.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's exactly it. And I can tell you that, like the last surgery, I was just starting to feel the that pain starting to go away. Like the pressure points were starting to ease up,
Oh,
and now they're sort of back again.
all
And
over again.
so, yeah, that's really probably the greatest discomfort is those pressure points where
And
that.
that makes sense. And they talked about the least. We are running short of time. So, Marcus, any final thoughts?
No, I mean, just the surgery is what it is. Hopefully nothing I said deters anybody. I think, I'm excited to get the modular unit put in place um, to start, getting the benefits of the surgery.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's where I'm at now. I've had the two brain surgeries. Nothing to this point has been terrible or excruciating. But they are serious, and there's something that people should take seriously, and yeah, I mean, just all I would say before I go is just lots of meetings with your surgeon. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Reach out to Steve. He can reach out to me, but I would say just go in there, knowing what's going through. Because I'll tell you, the biggest fear, and I don't know if you went through this, but I did sort of have a scary moment a couple of days before each surgery where I started thinking, they're going to put a device in my head. And that kind of freaked me out a little
Yeah.
bit a couple of
Yeah.
days before. And as I sat there in bed, I was like, well, I don't have anything there, but in a couple of days, I'm going to have something there. And that's a true statement. But um, you just have to kind of work through that. And that for me was probably the toughest thing to work
Yeah,
through.
it's not like you get 30 days to try it, and then Amazon returns. No,
Yeah.
it doesn't work like that. It's pretty much a lifetime commitment when you
No,
make
it
it.
is.
Now, the
Yeah.
one thing that I would like to say, and first of all, thank you, Marcus, very much. We're looking forward to the kind of the final chapter, see how things go with the programming. But the one thing I would like to say for everybody out there is that, um, as Marcus said, do your homework. Now, I will point out, I did not ponder this for 7 or 8 years. I didn't even know about DBS surgery a year before I had the surgery. Well, a little bit before. But it just for me and my lifestyle and what I hope to accomplish with the years left on this earth is what what can I what are my options? Well, drugs weren't an option. I tried them. They all failed after they worked for a while, but then they failed. It was unfortunate. Um, so anyway, do your homework. Talk to your surgeon. Give it due thought and understand. First of all, they do DBS. There is no real age limitation for DBS surgery. So it can be done into your 80s, and I know that because I've seen it. I've talked to some friends of friends, and that type of thing. I can't really mention their names or anything, but one in particular down in Florida had DBS surgery over 20 years ago. She is now in her 80s, and darn glad she had it. So keep all of that in mind, folks. It's not a walk in the park, but it is. In other words, I've gotten so much of my life back, my vim and vigor. I was out today. I was laughing earlier when you said your son was cutting your grass. Guess who was cutting their grass? Well, I couldn't have done that last year. I did not have the stamina. But after I got done with that, I'm digging up a tree. We've got a tree that died. It was one of those Japanese maple, real weepy things, and so I'm out there digging around the roots and stuff. Couldn't have done that either. Stamina. So anyway, Marcus, I'm going to let you say goodbye to everybody, and then I'm going to say goodbye.
No, thanks, Steve. No, thanks again, and just let me know if there's anything you need or anything you want me to cover, and yeah, I'll talk through it.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Honestly didn't expect this to go this long because Marcus came in with a lot of new information. Hope you're enjoying it. Remember to like and subscribe. That is on YouTube, guys. I'm telling you, it is the lifeblood. And it's not so much for monetization purposes. It's call it ego gratification, whatever you want. I've also got some upcoming things for my podcast and vlog that should be, I hope you find them very interesting. They're going to go by the generic name of the ET Minute. And it's going to be little factoids. And I'm going to throw them out there maybe once, twice a week, just to kind of keep things moving. For those of you who don't have, 50 minutes to watch a podcast or listen to a podcast, hopefully you can tune into that. So remember, hit those buttons, like and subscribe, and I will talk to you later. Thank you so much. So we've got a couple of minutes, and I'll edit this part out.
You need to turn off the recording or no?
Well, I do.
Okay.
Well, I can turn it off. I think we're done. I just want to make sure there wasn't something you wanted to tell me off air. Okay.
No, I mean, buy you a J&G, then grab a J&G's pizza when we come up there.
Oh, you've been to... Oh, sure, that's right. You were from Toledo.
I grew up in Sylvania.
Yeah,
so.
Oh, God. They're still there. They've expanded it a little bit. And I just realized, no wonder my webcam was being flaky. This switched over, even though I told it I wanted to use my new Brio, it switched over to the stupid thing here. So anyway, Marcus, have a good one. Glad you came through everything okay. And I'm going to leave it to you to contact me. If you want to contact me after the implant surgery, that's fine. Or if you want to wait until it's activated, that's fine too.
No, I mean, I think keep it consistent. If you want to do the journey, just do this like a couple days after the implant.
Okay.
And then we'll do I guess the fourth one would be just after they program
the activation. Sure. Because like me, I was beaming ear to ear. I couldn't stop smiling, and it was pretty profound.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Like I said, I just don't. Maybe it's me, but I just don't think about it. They're just all sort of stages along the way, and then you get to the end. But right now, I'm just my whole center of focus is just healing and getting through that. So that's where I'm at now.
All right.
So.
Well, hey, Marcus, have a good one, and we'll talk to you whenever. We'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.
Okay, thanks. You too, Steve. Take care.
Bye-bye.